1423, Central Command. 7 contacts inbound. Altitude dropping fast. Not missiles, bombers. B-2 Spirits. Stealth. Each one carrying a weapon the world had never seen used in combat. A 30,000-pound penetrator designed for one purpose: to reach through 300 feet of solid mountain rock and detonate inside. Iran had spent decades and billions of dollars building underground cities for its missiles, tunnels wide enough for military convoys, halls lined with hundreds of ballistic weapons pointed across the Middle East. The regime called them untouchable. They were wrong. To understand what happened here, you need to understand the scale of what Iran built and why it believed those structures made it invincible. Iran's missile city concept has no direct equivalent in Western military doctrine. These weren't storage depots. They were fully operational subterranean ecosystems: roads, command centers, logistics infrastructure, and ballistic launch systems, all embedded inside mountains and hardened terrain. The Foundation for Defensive Democracies confirmed Iran had released its own video tours of at least 4 such facilities. A deliberate show of strength, a strategic statement. Look what we have, try and stop us. The missile inventory inside included the Hajj Qasim and the Ghadr H, medium-range ballistics with approximately 1,000-kilometer reach, alongside land attack cruise missiles and drone stockpiles. The numbers going into this conflict: an estimated 8,000 missile arsenal being actively rebuilt after last year's 12-day war with Israel, according to Israeli intelligence assessments published by the Alma Research Center. But here's what nobody inside Tehran fully accounted for. The United States had been watching, not for weeks, not for months, for 15 years. But here's what nobody saw coming. The weapon they feared least was the one they'd been feeding intelligence to for a decade and a half. The GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the MOP, 20 feet long, 11 tons of TNT-equivalent explosive power, capable of tunneling through more than 100 feet of reinforced concrete before detonation. It had been tested, studied, stockpiled, and never once used in operational combat until now. 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers departed Whiteman Air Force Base, Missouri. 18 hours of flight, multiple aerial refueling cycles over the Atlantic. A separate B-2 formation flew west, toward the Pacific, as a deliberate decoy, seeding confusion into every intelligence network watching American aircraft movements. Over 125 aircraft total participated: fighter escorts, surveillance assets, tankers, submarines. The mission had a name: Operation Midnight Hammer. The targets: Fordow uranium enrichment plant and Natanz nuclear facility. Fordow specifically is buried beneath 300 feet of mountain rock. Iran chose that location with precision. Conventional munitions could not reach it. It was never meant to be reachable. But the Defense Threat Reduction Agency had spent 15 years mapping it. Every vent shaft, every exhaust conduit, every electrical junction, every piece of equipment entering or leaving the site. General Dan Caney, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, told reporters that 2 DTRA officers had literally dreamed about this target as they slept. This was not improvised. This was obsessive, patient, generational preparation. The strike sequence at Fordow was engineered like a surgical procedure. The lead B-2 dropped 2 MOPs onto the first aim point. The first bomb forcibly removed the protective concrete cap, exposing the main shaft underneath. Weapons 2, 3, 4, and 5 then entered that open shaft, traveling at over 1,000 feet per second into the complex below, before detonating in what Caney called the mission space. 12 MOPs into Fordow, 2 into Natanz. And from a submarine operating in the Central Command area, more than 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles simultaneously struck surface infrastructure at the Isfahan complex. Satellite imagery from Maxar Technologies told the rest of the story. Several large-diameter craters appeared along the ridgeline above Fordow. A layer of gray-blue ash spread across a wide perimeter. Multiple tunnel entrances, sealed with debris. Open-source analysts supplying topographic modeling over the imagery concluded the strike had reached the Cascade Hall buried beneath the impact points. This was not a near miss. This was surgical destruction at a depth the world had never witnessed in live combat. This is where everything changes. Because the nuclear strikes were only the final chapter. The real story began 10 days earlier. Iran's air defense network, a system built over 4 decades at a cost of tens of billions of dollars, went dark before a single MOP was released. The country that had positioned its integrated SAM network as the guarantor of its airspace was blind at the moment it mattered most. And the question nobody in Tehran could answer in time was simple. When did they lose it? Israeli strikes beginning June 13th had spent approximately 10 days dismantling Iran's layered air defense architecture before Operation Midnight Hammer ever launched. The Alma Research Center's operational assessment: approximately 85% of Iranian air defense components destroyed across all of Iran. Radars, detection systems, SAM batteries, command nodes. In the June 2025 12-day war, Israel achieved air superiority over 3 specific regions. Now it covered the entire country. Tehran itself was open. General Kaney confirmed at the Pentagon briefing, Iran's surface-to-air missile systems did not detect the incoming strike package at all. That blind spot is what allowed the nuclear strikes to land. And that same blind spot is what turned Iran's missile cities into a trap. The logic of the missile city strategy was built on mobility. The ability to move weapons in, load launchers, fire, relocate, and reload before adversary ISR could fix a target. What Iran did instead was concentrate that mobility into fixed infrastructure: tunnels, roads, entrances, exits. Sam Lyer of the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies put the fatal flaw directly. What was once mobile and difficult to find is no longer mobile and easier to hit. Fixed targets do not hide, they wait. US and Israeli intelligence had already mapped the locations of every significant missile city long before the first strike. Satellite imagery captured transportation patterns, personnel movements, vehicle traffic, thermal signatures. Roads into remote terrain attract attention. Construction timelines leave records. The entire surveillance apparatus, years of quiet, continuous overhead observation, had already resolved the target set before the order was given. The strike approach was wave-based. Former U.S. Army missile specialist Colin David described the methodology. Multiple waves, each one destroying 2 or 3 targets simultaneously, progressively degrading surface infrastructure and launcher capacity, sealing tunnel entrances, and entombing whatever remained inside. The BLU-109 penetrator, a 2,000-pound steel-cased bomb with GPS-guided delivery, served as the campaign workhorse, delivered from distances up to 15 miles, well beyond the reach of whatever remained of Iran's SHORAD systems. Satellite imagery published by the New York Times on March 3rd documented the results near Isfahan, an entire surface facility leveled. In Kangavar, a tunnel entrance caved in. In Kermanshah, above-ground structures demolished, and a crater sitting directly adjacent to a tunnel entrance. Another penetrator had found its mark, collapsed the passage, and sealed the interior permanently. Iranian missiles were now entombed. The cycle that the missile city strategy depended on, launch, relocate, replenish, was broken. U.S. and Israeli warplanes operating with continuous ISR coverage over dozens of hardened sites struck mobile TELs the moment they emerged to fire. No ECM could mask the thermal signature of a ballistic missile launcher moving into firing position. No camouflage net stopped a synthetic aperture radar lock. 30 seconds from now, you'll understand why this matters beyond Iran. The battlefield data confirms the outcome. Iran opened the conflict on February 28th with approximately 480 missile launches in a single day, a saturation strike intended to overwhelm Allied missile defense systems, including the THAAD batteries and Aegis-equipped naval assets operating in the theater. By March 9th, that daily launch rate had collapsed to approximately 40, a 92% reduction in 10 days. Drone launches followed the same curve, from 720 per day at peak down to approximately 60 within the same window. Admiral Brad Cooper, head of CENTCOM, confirmed on March 3rd, Iran's ability to threaten U.S. forces and regional partners was in accelerating decline. For comparison, in the June 2025 12-day war, Iran fired approximately 627 ballistic missiles and 735 drones across the entire engagement. In the current conflict, Iran had exceeded those totals within the first 4 days. But the collapse came faster, and the cause was structural rather than logistical. The missiles were not being consumed. The capacity to use them was being physically removed. The U.S. then extended the campaign beyond weapons destruction. Admiral Cooper announced strikes targeting Iran's ballistic missile industrial base. Not just the arsenals, but the factories producing them, the supply chains feeding them, the engineering infrastructure that would allow any form of reconstitution. The Alma Research Center confirmed simultaneous damage to launching, storage, and production capabilities. Iran's ability to rebuild was being addressed in parallel with its ability to fight. At the nuclear level, the outcome was definitive. David Albright, analyzing IAEA data following the U.S. strikes, concluded that Iran has no viable path to produce weapons-grade uranium at any known centrifuge facility, for the first time in 15 years. 15 years of nuclear ambition, eliminated in a single night by 7 aircraft that Iran never detected. The strategic consequences extend well beyond Tehran. For Vladimir Putin, Iran was a load-bearing pillar in the alternative power architecture he had spent years constructing. A missile-armed, nuclear-adjacent regional power capable of pinning American resources in the Middle East while Russia pursued its objectives in Ukraine. That calculation is now gone. And for China, watching from across the Taiwan Strait, the lesson is not lost. Even deeply buried, hardened infrastructure, the kind that anchors any A2/AD strategy, is vulnerable if an adversary has the patience to map it and the munitions to reach it. The F-35 and next-generation strike packages that dismantled Iranian air defense are the same tool set that would operate in any Pacific contingency. This is where everything changes, not just for Iran, but for every power that built its deterrence around depth and concealment. Iran built its missile cities as insurance, as the guarantee of regime survival. It believed that enough concrete, enough rock, enough depth would make it immune to the kind of power only one country on Earth can bring to bear. It was not a bad bet. For 30 years, it worked, because the right weapon did not yet exist, or the political will to use it had not materialized. Both conditions changed at once. The lesson of Fordow is not about the GBU-57. It is about 15 years of a DTRA officer losing sleep over a vent shaft. It is about patience, ISR continuity, and the gap between building a fortress and believing no one is watching you build it. The question worth sitting with now is this: which other military powers are making the same assumption Iran made, that their hardened depth is permanent protection? And which ones have already been quietly mapped by the intelligence apparatus that just proved it can see through a mountain? That answer shapes the next decade of deterrence.